Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about different types of bear markets. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, naturally, the last video ruffled a few feathers, to say the least. But I think when you only look at the data and also apply what I would consider to be my metric for identifying when things are bullish or bearish, it just defines where our current conditions as bearish. Again, it's not something that I necessarily, emotionally decide on the market conditions being bearish. It's nothing like that. It's just to say, well, the data suggests that things are bearish. Now, that does not mean that things will not turn around. It doesn't mean that the bear market has to last 2 years. It could be that the bear market lasts 3 months or 6 months and then gets back on track. So in this video, we're going to talk about the different types of bear markets that we have seen in the past and to show that not all of them are these long, drawn out bear markets. Some of them can be rather short. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into that. And what I use when I typically look at bullish phases of the cycle and bearish phases, I look at whether we're above either the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA. So this right here is color-coded green during times when Bitcoin is above either its 20-week SMA or its 21-week EMA, and then the red lines are when it's below both of them. Okay, and so the nice thing is, if you're looking at this from an unbiased perspective, say in a market that you have nothing in right now because it's in the past, if you look at, say, like this market, we could look at this phase of Bitcoin's life and say, okay, well, I mean, this generally looks like a bull market. It more or less went up, and there were not a whole lot of sustained down times. And then if you pull the bull market support band on there, you can see we were above that bull market support band during the entire time. So that would encompass, say, this bull market. Now, if we look at the current bull market that we've just been in since April of 2020, you can see it lasted until May of 2021 before this turned red again. And if you look at this, where it turned green, it was right here, and then it turned red right here. So again, from a unbiased perspective, just looking at the data and applying a metric of saying, okay, it's either above the 20-week or the 21-week EMA or SMA, or it's below it. And if you only use that metric to identify your bull phases and your bear phases, then it doesn't really care what your emotions tell you about the situation. It's just looking at the data. And we can look at this and say, okay, we were above the 20-week, we were super bullish during this time. Over here, we were above the 20-week, we were super bullish during this time. Okay? You look at a phase where it was mostly red with a few little green movements in here, as we sometimes can get above one of the moving averages but not necessarily both. And if we look at, say, that region when we were below the 20-week, it was generally down. Okay, so it is what it is, right? I mean, this was generally up above the 20-week, below the 20-week, generally down. Above the 20-week, or sorry, this one wasn't, we haven't looked at that one yet. This one was above, generally up. Okay, so when we look at this, we have to say, well, there are different types of bear markets. You have some types like this one that lasted more or less from January of 2018 until March of 2019 before seeing any significant movement to the upside. Okay, that was a longer bear market. You had this one over here that lasted from August of 2014 till June of 2015, and we even had another, a briefer move below the 20-week before going above it for a few weeks and then continuing. But more or less, we can look at this area here and say it was more or less a bear market. This was more or less a bear market. Okay. We also have other phases like this, where it's really not as long of a bear market as these other phases of the cycle. So this is more like an intra-cycle bear market, not necessarily a bear market, in my opinion, that separates one market cycle from the other. It is somewhat subjective, I will grant you that, but I don't consider this phase here to be, a bear market that separates one market cycle from another. I don't think anyone's looking at these charts and saying, or not many people, I'm sure someone is, but I don't think many people would look at these charts and say that this is a market cycle and then that this is a new market cycle. Most people would probably say either they're both part of the same cycle and it measured it from the bottom, or you measure it from the halving, which would be way over here, and you just kind of ignore all the stuff that happened before the halving, which was after the last bear market. So when we talk about being in a bear market, we don't necessarily mean that it has to last for like 15 months or something. It could be similar to 2019, where it just more or less trends down for a while, but doesn't necessarily put us into this like year and a half bear market followed by a year to year and a half accumulation phase. So I do think it's important to note the differences between different types of bear markets that we can have. My opinion, as I've mentioned many times on the channel, but I find the need to repeat myself because there's always new people that join the channel that don't know where my stance is. My stance on Bitcoin, as I've always said, is that I remain very bullish on Bitcoin over the macro scale. Short term, I'm leaning towards, okay, it seems like things are a little bit bearish right now, but medium term to long term, I still remain bullish. I contend that there's a possibility that things could get bullish again this year. Okay, so I don't want to necessarily say that when we're in a bear market that things have to stay that way for a certain period of time, because if history is any indication, we know that things can turn around. Things turned around in 2019. I mean, we went down for a few months. Okay, we went down for a few months, but ultimately we got back on track. And we had periods above the 20-week right here. We had a period above the 20-week right here. And you can see that we were ultimately able to get back on track. And from the time we broke the 20-week to the time we actually got back above it and actually entered a bull market, it was only 200 days. It wasn't, a 2 to 3 year wait to put in a new all-time high. So I do not think Bitcoin will have to spend 2 to 3 years before it gets to a new all-time high. But I do think it'll take more than like a few weeks. Because I know there's a lot of people saying that we're going to have a V-shaped recovery. And if we do, great. But I think it's more likely than not that we have a period where the price is bearish for a little while and moving sideways at the very least. And the reason we look at this is not to say, is that what Ben emotionally feels? Is that, is he feeling bearish today? I just base it on this indicator that now has popped up red again. And to me, when it's red, things are bearish. It's nothing more, nothing less. If we get back above either the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA, I think the market conditions change again. Then we're back in a bull market, okay? So when we look at this, I think it's important to distinguish between, say, like a market cycle and a bull market. Because my contention is that you can have different phases of a cycle where, especially because I think that we're in a long cycle, I certainly, as we showed over here, I certainly don't expect the entire cycle to stay above the 20-week moving average. We already failed to hold it back in September of 2019, and I consider the cycle to have started back over here in December of 2018. So we already failed to hold the 20-week over here, but we can, our first move and then back down, and then our second move, second bull market here, and then back down. And then I think we'll probably just have another leg later on. I just don't buy the idea that Bitcoin's going to go to 300K this year, and that then all institutions are going to sell the end of 2021. Everything's going to be a bear market in 2022, and then we're all going to come back in 2024 and just repeat the same thing over and over again for the next 100 years. I don't think it's going to work like that. I think that the cycle of institutional money coming into the market will extend well beyond 2021. And that right now we're having a lull in the market, but that lull in the market is not going to last years. It's just a period of reaccumulation in terms of gearing up for our inevitable move to $100,000. So if anything, I think people should look at a bear market during this market cycle as nothing more than an opportunity. So I just want to make myself clear when we talk about a bear market within the market cycle. We had one in 2019 over here. I think we're just having another one. I don't know how long it's going to last. It could be 6 months, it could be 6 weeks. But when defining it using this metric, when I look at, say, bullish phases and bearish phases, right now things look pretty bearish. At some point that'll change, and then the market sentiment will change. Until then, this is just the way things are. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the premium list. You can find a link to the sale in the description below as well. Lock in the low rate. Thank you guys for tuning in. Definitely subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.